This is Struggling to Succeed. In this episode, I'll be discussing James Carse's book, Finite and Infinite Games. Okay, so I recently read this book, Finite and Infinite Games by James Carse. I have to say that I probably only really understood about 10% of this book. It was like reading the Tao Te Ching or The Art of War by Lao Tzu. I find it very difficult to digest. However, I think I was able to pull together the thread running through the idea of this book. The reason why I wanted to start with that explanation is that when I finished the book on the last page, I couldn't work out in my head whether I had just read 140 odd pages of gobbledygook or I had just read a life-defining book about game theory and business philosophy and just general life philosophy. To answer that question, I decided to go off into the jungle of the internet and review other people's opinions and views on this book. Because I thought it was brilliant in parts, but in other parts, I'd read a full page and I'd be like, I have no idea what I just read. I don't know what this means. As I dive deeper into the world of the internet to research this book, to try to get some ideas about what James Carse was actually saying, I came across a number of podcasts and TED Talks and lectures that talked about game theory and specifically talked about finite and infinite games. And one of those in particular was a TED Talk by Stephen Timoney. And when I watched that video, all of a sudden this book clicked. Now, not all of it clicked, but I went from kind of thinking about did I understand it to be like, oh, I kind of get the high level concept now. And it excited me because I realized that I've spent most of my life not really understanding that I'm actually playing a number of different games all at once. I'm playing in finite games and I'm also playing in infinite games. And without actually understanding the game that you're playing, how are you meant to even understand what you're doing? To give you a quick breakdown, finite games are games that the players are known, the rules are set, and there's a clear objective. Infinite games are set out as games where the players are known and unknown. It's also set out that the rules are changeable or always changing, and that the objective is to keep the game going. So for instance, a game of soccer or football would be a finite game because it has rules, there's known teams, and there's an objective. And then infinite games could be life. Life's an infinite game. Business is an infinite game. The philosophy of sport or exercise is infinite, but soccer is a finite game within that. That quick description is specifically from Stephen Timoney and his TED Talk on the subject, which I'll post the links below. But that helped me understand what James Carse was trying to get across when he was discussing infinite and finite games. Both Stephen Timoney and James Carse talk about the fact that two players can play infinite games, two players can play finite games, but when you pitch an infinite player against a finite player, it doesn't quite work out. And it's generally the finite player that gets stuck because they're trying to play by a set of rules that the other person hasn't even agreed to or even knows. The example that Stephen Timoney used, and which I'm going to discuss today as well, because I think it was, for me, the most conceptual one that I was like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. He discussed business as an infinite game. Business in general. Business has been happening on this planet long before any of the companies that we know today have been around, and will continue long after all of us have moved on and stopped playing our infinite game. And what he discusses is that the only way that somebody can stop playing an infinite game is when they run out of resources or they merge with somebody else. So as a human being in the infinite game of life, we run out of resources, we die. But the infinite game of life keeps going on. In business, in the infinite game of business, a company either goes out of business, is bought out by another business, or it merges with another business. But the game of business goes on. Nobody actually wins the game of business. Like, nobody actually wins the game of life. There's not somebody who's like, I won life. Yeah. There's not a company out there that says, I won business. Because there is no way to win business, because it's an infinite game. Now, within business, there's finite games that are usually arbitrary. They're finite games because organizations set their own goals, targets, key performance indicators, and then they run their whole organization and systems around achieving those goals. So they're kind of playing a finite game with themselves and their competitors within the infinite game of business. Now, the example that Simon Sinek used, which I thought was very good, was the fact that Apple kind of play an infinite game. Apple is all about the philosophy of their company, and it's kind of all about, especially in their peak, they were all about the strategies they were using and always about the future. How can we make things better for our customers? How can we teach our people to teach the new people? How can we improve customer service? They're all about expanding their brand through their vision. And then you take someone like Microsoft, that at a certain point when Microsoft were on the way down and were trailing behind Apple, all they did was, how are we going to beat Apple? How are we going to compete with Apple? Their focus was on a finite set of rules, on a competitor. I could really get lost talking about this subject. It could take me hours to get through what James Carse was trying to say in his book. The explanations and the examples that I give you that came from Simon Sinek's TED Talk are very high level and just give you a very tiny glimpse into the difference between a finite and an infinite game. During my research, when I was trying to work out more about the understanding of the actual book, it led me down a endless path that linked into game theory, linked into business systems, and even took me down a path where I was looking at spiral dynamics and Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Now, that is a Pandora's box or a rabbit hole that you could just fall into and spend a lifetime researching and discussing. So in this video, I don't think it's really appropriate for me to try to link all those different areas together. However, I feel this book is a gateway to understanding the philosophies behind game theory and a really, really strong foundational views on business theory, game theory, and just life games, and understanding that when you enter a contract with a bank, you're in a finite game. When you're working in a bureaucratic system or a job and you want to be a manager, you're in a finite game. When you're playing sports, you're in a finite game. All these different games that I've been playing in my life that I didn't actually understand that I was in finite games. One of the other key takeaways that I got from the book and doing further research was to make sure that going forward in my life, that when I'm making decisions, that I'm making them based from my infinite vision of my life and my beliefs and my philosophies. And I'm not constantly making my decisions based on finite rules and competitive rules and reactionary rules, that my decisions aren't based in this sort of what you could describe as short-term thinking. This has been helpful to understand that if I don't have a set of life values or core values or beliefs to lean back on that help me make my decisions, I'm always going to be in finite games. I'm always going to be making finite decisions because I've got nothing to relate those decisions on, those finite, in the moment decisions within my business work, within my sports games, within my life. I have no foundational values to base those decisions off. And I thought that was a very important point. Now, because I'm going through my struggling to succeed journey, I have got a set of core values and beliefs that I lean on. But I didn't actually understand that that was part of an infinite game. I just thought that was goal setting and part of achievement and something that winners and entrepreneurs and successful people did. You had core values and you based all your decisions on those core values. But then I'm reading this book, and then with the further research, I was like, oh, hold on a second. Life is an infinite game. And if I don't have a set of core values and beliefs set out for my life, I won't be making infinite decisions in my life. I will be reacting and making finite decisions all the time in my life and just bumbling along, eventually running out of resources and losing the game of life and dropping out. I would much rather continue my life with a set of core values and principles and then try to succeed in life well, not really succeed. I don't want to beat anybody. I just want to stick to what I believe in and make my decisions on the long term and for the future and play the infinite game until I run out of resources and I leave the game of life. I really enjoyed the book. I didn't understand a lot of it. I am going to reread it again at different times. I don't think I've done the book any real justice in reviewing it. It really was business philosophy at its deepest. But if you have an opportunity to read it, or at least go online and type in Finite and Infinite Games by James Carse and just listen to some of the podcasts and watch some of the YouTube videos around game theory, I would really, really recommend it. This has now become a fundamental part of my thinking. And I will definitely be diving deeper down the rabbit hole of game theory and systems theory and how those theories can affect my day-to-day life. Thanks very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this book review. If you did, please go ahead and hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe so you can follow along and get lots more content on my struggling to succeed journey. My mission here is to hopefully deliver you guys bite-sized videos full of tips, techniques, and strategies that can help you start your journey of success. Thanks very much for watching. Hope to see you next time. And as always, make it a good one.